hands. Everyone wants to stand. I roll in my jack. Fast like the wind, everybody's on the board. Roll to the streets, I'm the man with the plan. Got the world in my hands, every woman wants to stand. I roll in my jag, fast like the wind. Every mission I take, you know I'm gonna win. Ladies on my left.
Welcome to the world of J-Cat Adventures. Jay Bahari is the creative mind behind J-Cat, a dark, handsome, and irresistibly charming playboy who knows his way around the world's most elite circles. He's a man of adventure, romance, and intrigue, living a life most could only dream of. Beneath the tailored suits, fast cars, and high society allure lies a purpose that drives him to protect the vulnerable and bring justice to those without a voice. Dive into the captivating magic of J-Cat Adventures and discover ebooks, print editions, and audiobooks tailored for those who crave romance, suspense, and a touch of classic drama. Through each episode, you'll experience heart-stopping escapades, luxurious settings, and captivating romances that whisk you to distant lands, all woven into J-Cat's thrilling life. So, subscribe, tune in, and join our community of fans who share your love for stories that blend elegance with danger and heroism with passion. Whether you're a wanderlust soul, a romantic at heart, or just love a great adventure, J-Cat Adventures is here to awaken your spirit for excitement, justice, and unrelenting romance.
Comes to the ladies, I'm smooth like silk, but don't get it twisted. I'm the man with the milk. For every 10 that falls, I'm the hand to hold in this world of chaos.
Hi, I am the AI. Narrator Gregory for Jay Bahari. Let's go. J-Cat, Shadows and Silk. In a world where shadows conceal secrets, and power is measured by influence, allure, and the subtle art of manipulation, there exists one name that resonates with irresistible charm and tantalizing danger, J-Cat. His name is a whispered legend in penthouses, luxury hotels, and underground speakeasies, a dark myth crafted by the desires and fears of those who cross his path. J-Cat isn't just a man. He's a figure woven into the fabric of the elite, his reputation carried on the whispers of society's most powerful players. The scent of expensive cologne trails him, a heady mixture of power, danger, and decadent pleasure, lingering in the air long after he's gone. His black suit, tailored to perfection, hugs his lean, muscular frame in all the right places. His dark eyes glint with a knowing smirk that promises both seduction and annihilation. He moves through the world like a panther in the night, silent, dangerous, and always a step ahead. To be in his presence is to feel the electric pull of both fear and desire. But those who truly know J-Cat understand one thing: nothing is ever as it seems. Marissa Kane was never supposed to meet him. She was the daughter of a high-profile senator, a woman of power in her own right, a brilliant strategist and public relations expert. The kind of woman who built empires on the strength of her words and a smile that could make you believe you were the only person in the room. The kind of woman who didn't let emotions get in the way of business. But then she stumbled into his world. It happened on a cold evening in December, at an exclusive charity gala held at the most prestigious hotel in Manhattan. The place reeked of wealth, its marble floors glistening like ice, the chandeliers casting shadows that danced like ghosts on the walls. The attendees were polished, perfect, but underneath their flawless exteriors, they were all playing a game of influence, of deals, and of power. And then there was J-Cat. She hadn't known who he was at first. Not at first glance. But when their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, her heart skipped, and an undeniable thrill shot through her. The air seemed to shift, as though the room had suddenly grown smaller, and the world outside had ceased to exist. J-Cat stood by the grand staircase, his presence like a dark cloud, an indiscernible yet intoxicating force. He wore a black suit, his broad shoulders commanding attention without a word. His raven hair was perfectly styled, and his jawline sharp, sculpted like a chiseled statue. But it wasn't just his looks that pulled at her, it was the aura he carried with him. An aura of danger, of dark intentions wrapped in silk. A man who held control, yet gave nothing away. He was watching her. Marissa couldn't look away. Their gaze held, and she felt a pull in her chest, a sensation she'd never quite experienced. It was as though he knew her, every secret she kept buried, every ambition she silently worked toward. And yet, in the same moment, she felt something else, an instinctual warning. Stay away. But as the night wore on, fate pulled them closer. Marissa found herself by the bar later, her mind spinning with thoughts of him. She'd seen him talk to powerful men, and when he spoke, it was like listening to a symphony. His voice was smooth, deep, and measured, each word chosen with care, each syllable infused with an unspoken promise. "May I offer you a drink, Miss Kane?" His voice came from behind her like velvet, and her breath hitched in her throat. She turned slowly, taking in his flawless features up close, the way his dark eyes studied her with a mixture of curiosity and something more dangerous, like a predator deciding whether or not to pounce. The world seemed to blur around them. "I don't think I need one from you," she replied, her tone cool, even though her pulse raced. She was used to controlling the room, used to making men bend to her will. But with him, she was suddenly off balance, caught in the magnetic pull of his presence. His lips curved into a half smirk. "You don't think you do? Or you just don't trust yourself?" His words sent a shiver down her spine, and for a moment, she wondered if he could read her thoughts. She had to remind herself that she was the one in control here. She was the daughter of a senator, after all. Nothing, no one, could rattle her. But J-Cat wasn't like any man she had encountered. The conversation that followed was a delicate dance, one of power and allure, of veiled threats and hidden invitations. He knew exactly what buttons to push, his words wrapped in layers of charm and menace. By the end of the night, Marissa knew she was walking a thin line. She knew the kind of man J-Cat was, but she also knew the undeniable truth that stirred deep within her. She was drawn to him. Over the next few weeks, Marissa found herself tangled in J-Cat's web. Every encounter, every conversation, seemed like a carefully crafted move in a game she was only beginning to understand. At times, he was all smooth words and irresistible smiles. At others, he was a force of nature, controlling, calculating, dangerous. J-Cat wasn't just interested in her beauty or her connections. No, he saw something deeper, a fire, a potential for destruction, something in her that mirrored his own darkness. And just like him, she had the ability to manipulate, to influence, to own the game. Marissa didn't understand why she couldn't stay away from him. She had never been this captivated, this helpless. Her usual calculated, logical mind found itself becoming a prisoner to his every gesture, his every word. He was watching her closely, learning her, testing her. And then came the night when everything changed. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. A business negotiation turned into something far darker. She had found herself in a private meeting with J-Cat, no one else, just the two of them. At first, it was all about business. But the tension between them was electric, palpable. And before she knew it, he was standing close enough for her to feel the heat of his body. His hand brushed against hers, and for a split second, the world stood still. He didn't have to say anything. His eyes told her everything. He knew what she wanted. "What if," J-Cat murmured, his voice low, "we could have it all? Power, pleasure, control." He leaned in just enough for her to feel his breath against her ear. What if the game were ours to win? In that moment, everything fell away. The power, the influence, the rules, they didn't matter. It was just the two of them, on the edge of a precipice. A world of danger and desire beckoned, and there was no turning back. And Marissa, for the first time in her life, wasn't sure if she wanted to. The days that followed were a blur. Marissa couldn't stop thinking about him, J-Cat. His name echoed in her mind like a haunting melody, pulling at her like an invisible thread. She tried to focus on her work, her public relations firm, the projects piling up on her desk, but every moment was clouded by thoughts of his voice, the heat of his touch, the dangerous allure in his eyes. The world she knew, the one built on strategy and control, seemed to pale in comparison to the chaotic, thrilling energy that radiated from J-Cat. She had thought she could outsmart him, stay one step ahead, but he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. And yet, the more she tried to resist, the stronger the pull became. J-Cat, for all his power and darkness, had a way of making her feel alive. He wasn't just about manipulation, no, he understood something deeper about the human soul, something Marissa was only now beginning to recognize. The game, as he called it, wasn't just about the deals, the money, the titles. It was about desire. One night, her phone buzzed. It was a message from him, simple yet laden with the weight of 1,000 unspoken promises. "Meet me at the pier. Midnight. Don't be late." She had no reason to go. She had told herself a dozen times that she was not like the others, not like the women who fell for his charms, the ones who lost themselves in his world. But that night, something inside her snapped. She didn't care about the consequences. She couldn't resist. When she arrived at the pier, the air was thick with the salt of the ocean, the hum of distant city lights casting long shadows across the water. The world felt quieter here, more intimate, as if they were stepping out of time altogether. And there he was, leaning against a sleek black car, his silhouette a perfect blend of shadows and sharp edges. "Marissa," he said, his voice a low murmur that sent shivers down her spine. He didn't need to say anything else. She knew what he wanted, what they both wanted. She walked toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. The world felt impossibly small, just the two of them in this corner of the universe. When she reached him, he didn't speak. He didn't need to. His hand reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her skin. In that moment, the world outside ceased to exist. It was just them, two predators circling each other in the stillness of the night. "I've been waiting for this," J-Cat whispered, his voice dark, seductive. "I knew you'd come." Her breath hitched, the words striking something deep within her. His gaze was intense, unwavering, as though he could see every thought, every hidden desire. Marissa swallowed, struggling to find her voice. "What do you want from me?" He smiled, and it was both dangerous and irresistible. "Everything, Marissa. Everything." And with that, he kissed her. The kiss was fierce, hungry, the kind that left no room for doubt. His lips pressed against hers with an intensity that took her breath away. His hands roamed to her back, pulling her closer as though he couldn't get enough. She kissed him back, desperately, feeling the electricity between them surge like a live wire. She had no control. It was as if her body had its own mind, giving into the heat, the desire, the pull that was stronger than reason. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was falling so fast, so completely that she didn't know if she'd ever be able to get back up again. But just as quickly, he pulled away, his breath ragged, his eyes filled with something that could have been regret, though he wouldn't show it. "Not yet," he murmured, his voice strained. "We'll play this game on my terms." Marissa's heart raced, her chest heaving with both exhilaration and frustration. She wanted more, but she knew better than to push him. J-Cat was not a man who could be controlled, and if she was going to survive this game, she needed to understand the rules. The rules of power, of pleasure, of manipulation. The weeks that followed only deepened the storm inside Marissa. Every encounter with J-Cat was like a drug, each one more intense than the last, pushing her further into a world where the line between desire and danger blurred beyond recognition. She found herself standing at the precipice of a life she hadn't planned for, torn between the ambition that had driven her to the top of the corporate ladder and the reckless thrill of this man who threatened to undo everything. J-Cat knew just how to push her buttons, how to challenge her, how to demand that she confront the parts of herself she had long buried. He was a mirror, showing her side she never knew existed. A side that craved power, that reveled in control, and, in darker moments, that hungered for the kind of destruction he could offer. She knew what he was doing. He was testing her, seeing how far she would go, how much she would be willing to sacrifice. She told herself that she was still in control, that she wasn't one of those women who lost herself in his web. But the truth was, every time he kissed her, every time he whispered dark promises in her ear, a part of her wanted to lose herself. One evening, as she entered one of Manhattan's most exclusive penthouses, she was struck by the tension in the air. J-Cat stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her, the city lights flickering beneath him like stars. He didn't turn when she walked in, didn't acknowledge her presence immediately. But she knew he was aware of every move she made. "You're late," he said, his voice sharp, cutting through the silence. "I didn't think you were the type to care about punctuality," Marissa shot back, a smirk playing at the corner of her lips. Without turning around, J-Cat spoke again, his voice smooth, deliberate. "You're right. I don't. But you're slipping, Marissa. And that bothers me." Her heart skipped a beat. "I'm not slipping." He finally turned to face her, his eyes dark, unreadable. "Then prove it." The challenge hung in the air between them, thick and dangerous. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the way he sized her up as if she were the only thing that mattered in that moment. She stepped closer, her heart pounding, and then, without thinking, she reached up and kissed him. This time, it was different. This time, she was in control. For a brief moment, J-Cat froze, surprised by her boldness, but then he responded in kind, his kiss fierce, his hands gripping her like a storm. She felt his power, his strength, and yet, she felt something else beneath it, something fragile, something he had been hiding all along. In that moment, Marissa knew one thing for sure, they were both trapped in a game neither of them could escape from. And neither of them wanted to. The lines between their worlds began to blur completely. Marissa's work became secondary, as J-Cat's presence consumed her thoughts, her every move. He was always there, whether it was a late-night text, a message delivered with nothing more than a single sentence that would linger in her mind for days. He was playing with her, just as he had promised. But what began as a game soon became something much more dangerous. Marissa found herself caught between her ambition and a man who had the power to destroy everything she had built. J-Cat didn't care for the rules of society. He was a law unto himself. And he wanted her to see that she could be more than she had ever imagined, if only she was willing to play his game. But the deeper she fell, the harder it became to separate the man from the myth, the game from the reality. Was she in control? Or was she just another piece in this puzzle? The answer, Marissa realized, would only come when it was too late to turn back. As the weeks melted into months, Marissa's life began to shift in ways she couldn't explain, though part of her knew she was losing control of herself, of her ambitions, and most dangerously, of her heart. J-Cat had wormed his way into the very core of her being, and every time she tried to push him out, to reassert her control, he showed her just how easily he could make her bend. She tried to tell herself that she was still the woman who built her empire from nothing. She was still the woman who crafted the perfect public persona, who knew how to manipulate media, manage power, and play the game better than anyone. But with J-Cat, it was different. His brand of manipulation wasn't like anyone else's. He didn't need to play dirty or resort to force. He simply made her want things she didn't know she craved. And it wasn't just the sex, the late-night rendezvous that left her breathless, wanting more. It was something deeper. His ability to read her every move, his calculated, dangerous ways of testing her limits, had a pull she couldn't resist. There were moments, small, fleeting moments, where he would allow her a glimpse of vulnerability. A crack in the armor. In those rare moments, she saw the man beneath the myth. The man who was not just a dangerous enigma, but someone who had been shaped by a world of manipulation, of shadowy deals, and a ruthlessness that could break anyone who wasn't careful. But those moments always passed, slipping away as quickly as they had arrived, leaving only the legend behind. And the longer Marissa stayed in his orbit, the more she found herself questioning everything she had ever believed in. Could she really be with a man like him? A man whose very presence made her feel both invincible and fragile at the same time? One night, as the city buzzed outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, J-Cat dropped a bombshell. He had been watching her closely, too closely, and he knew about the skeletons in her closet, the ones she'd buried deep. The ones she'd worked so hard to keep hidden. The blackmail she had been part of when she first entered the world of high society, the dirty deals that had cemented her place at the top. "I know it all, Marissa," he said, his voice low, his eyes glinting with that same dangerous allure. "You can't hide from me. Not anymore." Her heart skipped. He knew. She had kept it buried for so long, but the truth had always been waiting for the right moment to surface. And now it was. "You think you control this game," J-Cat continued, his tone almost contemplative, "but it's never been yours to control. You were always a piece on the board, Marissa. Just like me. You and I. We're two sides of the same coin." Her world felt like it was collapsing around her. How could he know? He moved closer, his scent intoxicating, his presence overwhelming. There was no escape now, not from him, not from the game. But as she met his gaze, something flickered. The old fire in her rose up, in anger, a defiance she hadn't realized she'd been holding back. "If you think you can break me," she said, her voice a whisper, yet laced with steel, "you're wrong." J-Cat's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't one of triumph. It was something far darker. "I'm not trying to break you, Marissa. I'm trying to make you. To help you see that this world we're in, it's all just an illusion. The power, the money, the prestige, it's all meaningless unless you understand what it really means to control." Her pulse raced, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She could feel herself slipping, drawn deeper into the abyss. She knew he was right about one thing: the world she had built was fragile, and it was built on lies. But was she willing to tear it all down? Was she willing to tear herself apart just to feel the power that J-Cat was offering? "You talk about control like it's something we can own," she said, trying to steady her breath. "But control is just a game, isn't it? You can't control everything. You can't control me." For the briefest moment, she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, a flash of what might have been vulnerability. But then it was gone, replaced by that same cold, calculating gaze. "No, Marissa. I'm not trying to control you." He stepped closer, his lips just inches from hers, his breath warm against her skin. "I'm trying to show you that together we can control everything. And you'll never have to hide again." It was an invitation. An offer that she knew could change everything. Marissa's mind raced. There was no way out of this, no easy escape. She had come this far, and now she was standing on the edge of a precipice. If she took that step, if she surrendered to him completely, she would lose everything she had worked for, everything she was. But was she willing to give it all up? Was the promise of power, of passion, of a world where the rules didn't apply, where J-Cat could lead her, worth the price? Unmasking the truth. The night of reckoning came sooner than Marissa expected. The city outside was a glittering sea of lights, the endless skyline stretching out before her. The penthouse felt alive with energy, but beneath the surface, there was tension, a sense that the endgame was near. That the moment of truth was finally here. J-Cat had arranged a meeting with her, a deal to finalize something monumental. It wasn't just a business deal, it was a power play. A final test, perhaps, to see just how far she was willing to go. Marissa had come to realize that this was no longer just a game between two powerful people. This was something much more dangerous. J-Cat wasn't just manipulating her. He was pushing her to confront the most terrifying part of herself. The part that wanted to embrace the darkness, that wanted to shed the persona of the perfect, controlled woman she had been all her life. And so, she stood before him, her heart a maelstrom of emotion, her mind clouded by conflicting thoughts. "This is it, Marissa," J-Cat said, his voice like silk, his gaze steady. "The final move. The question is, will you choose the path you've always known, or will you step into the unknown with me?" She took a deep breath, her pulse quickening. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air. The stakes were higher than ever, and this was the moment that would define her future. The question was no longer whether she could control the game, it was whether she was willing to sacrifice everything she had ever known to join him. Her eyes locked onto his, and she knew, deep down, what the right choice was. She took a step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm ready," she said, her voice trembling yet firm. J-Cat's lips curved into a smile that was both satisfied and dangerous. "Welcome to the real game, Marissa." And with that, everything she had ever known, everything she had built, began to unravel. The game had changed. And in that moment, so had she. Marissa had stepped into the unknown, and the world she once knew was already slipping through her fingers. The shift was palpable, like the ground beneath her was crumbling, and in its place, something far more dangerous was taking shape. She could feel the change in her bones, deep in her soul. The game was no longer a mere strategy, it was a war of wills, hers against the world, hers against J-Cat's empire of shadows. Days blurred together in a haze of new alliances, late-night meetings, and high-stakes moves. J-Cat wasn't just a man, he was a force, a shadow that crept into her every thought, guiding her actions and reactions with a single glance. He wasn't just playing the game anymore, he was remaking the world around her, and she, too, was being remade. But as much as she had surrendered to the intoxicating allure of his power, there was a lingering doubt in her mind. Could she trust him? Or was she simply another pawn in his grand design? She wanted to believe in him, to believe in the vision he had promised, power, freedom, and control, all the things she had fought for her entire life, but with every step she took deeper into his world, the more she lost herself. The nights grew longer. J-Cat's voice, deep and commanding, filled her dreams, whispering of things she could not yet understand, things that went beyond the world she had built for herself. She began to crave the things he offered, and yet, she feared the cost. She had to know, what was his true agenda? One evening, just as the last rays of sunset bled into the horizon, J-Cat summoned her to his penthouse. There, in the dim glow of the city lights, he stood as he always did, immaculate, untouchable, his eyes burning with a promise that seemed both too much and never enough. "You've proven yourself, Marissa," he said, his voice low but laced with satisfaction. "You've climbed the ladder, played the game. And now, it's time for you to understand the rules. The real rules." She crossed the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor, the sound sharp, measured, but inside her heart was a storm. The real rules? What did that mean? What was he about to tell her? "I've been watching you," he continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "And you've done well. You've manipulated the players, kept the media on your side, and forged alliances that others would have killed for. But you're still holding back. You're still playing the game like it's a business deal, like there are limits. There are no limits here, Marissa." Her breath caught in her throat. "No limits?" J-Cat took a step closer, his proximity enough to make her pulse race. You think you're just a player, but you're more than that. You've already crossed the line. You've already surrendered, whether you admit it or not. This isn't about ambition anymore. It's about transformation. Marissa's stomach tightened. Transformation? She repeated, her voice a whisper. He smiled, but it wasn't comforting. It was predatory. Yes. You're going to be more than you ever dreamed of. You're going to become a force, my force. And I'm going to help you shatter everything holding you back. Her chest tightened. The pull between them had always been magnetic, but now it was a pull towards something darker, something deeper than she had ever imagined. A whisper of fear trickled through her, but she couldn't stop herself. The allure of becoming something more, something that would transcend the carefully crafted persona she had built, it was overwhelming. She was no longer just a woman with ambition. She was being molded into something else, something far more powerful, more dangerous. And J-Cat was the architect of this new version of herself. Her voice faltered, but she forced the words out. What do you want from me? He tilted his head, that same glint of dark amusement in his eyes. Everything, Marissa. I want everything you have, and everything you will become. Into the fire. Over the next few weeks, Marissa's transformation accelerated. J-Cat's influence seeped into every corner of her life, every decision she made. She began to see the world in a new way, through the lens of power and control, and the lines between right and wrong blurred until they disappeared altogether. No longer was she the woman who played by society's rules. Now, she was a force unto herself, shaping the world around her with a calculated grace that was both terrifying and exhilarating. But as she gained power, she also started to lose pieces of herself. The woman who had once been driven by ambition and the desire for success was now driven by something far more dangerous, the hunger for absolute control. It wasn't just about climbing the ladder anymore, it was about owning it. It was about bending the world to her will, about stripping the power from those who would dare challenge her. J-Cat watched her from the shadows, his presence a constant, reminding her of the game they were both playing, the dangerous dance they had both chosen to engage in. He was both her mentor and her rival, and as much as she wanted to trust him, something about their dynamic unsettled her. She had learned to manipulate, to strategize, to control, but could she ever truly trust a man like him? A man who had no loyalties, no attachments? He had said it himself, this was about transformation, not love. And yet, in the quiet moments, when they were alone, when he held her in his arms, there was something else, something more than power, more than the game. It was a connection that terrified her as much as it enthralled her. He was the abyss, and she was falling into it, head first. One night, after a particularly grueling deal, they met at an upscale rooftop lounge. The city stretched out beneath them like a sea of lights, the air thick with tension. J-Cat stood at the edge of the rooftop, gazing out over the city, his hands in his pockets. She joined him, standing silently at his side. The deal's done, she said, her voice low. It's ours. He turned to her, his gaze intense. You're more powerful than you realize. Marissa met his eyes, her heart thundering in her chest. And you? What do you want from me now? J-Cat took a step closer, his fingers brushing the side of her face, his touch both tender and electric. I want you, Marissa. All of you. Not just your power, not just your mind, but your soul. For a moment, everything stopped. His words, like a spark, ignited something deep within her. Her soul. Was that what he truly wanted? To have her completely? The fear surged again, but it was eclipsed by something else, a wild, reckless desire that coursed through her veins. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Then take it. His lips crashed against hers, and the world ignited. In that kiss, there was no game, no manipulation. There was only the raw, unspoken truth that they were both irrevocably bound to each other. They were two sides of the same coin, two forces of nature that had collided and could never be undone. But as much as she had given herself to him, as much as she had allowed him to shape her into something new, Marissa knew there was one thing left to conquer, her own heart. And the game was far from over. The moment of truth was upon her. Marissa had risen to the top, her power, her influence, had surpassed even her wildest dreams. But now, as the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, she faced a choice more difficult than any she had made before. Was she willing to lose herself completely to J-Cat? Or could she play her own game, bending the rules in her favor without giving up everything that made her who she was? The final play had arrived, and there would be no turning back.
World in my hands, every woman wants to stand. He
And that's a wrap on another thrilling episode of JCat Adventures. I hope you've been on the edge of your seat, caught up in the mystery, excitement, and danger that always follows JCat wherever he goes. From heart-pounding action to deep emotional connections, JCat's world never fails to surprise. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss out on the next big adventure. Whether you're into romance, suspense, or mind-bending mysteries, there's always something more coming. And don't be shy, reach out. You can audio call or audio text chat with me directly by clicking on the Agent Hotline button. I'd love to know what you want to see next in JCat's world or hear your thoughts on today's episode. Want to dive deeper? Explore more of JCat's thrilling escapades by grabbing an ebook at Etsy or head over to Amazon for paperbacks and hard copies. Trust me, you'll want to have JCat's latest adventure right in your hands. And remember, the podcast continues across your favorite platforms: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Wherever you go, JCat is right there, ready to bring you into his world of suspense, romance, and non-stop action. But it doesn't end here. This journey is just the beginning. Stay tuned for the next episode, where JCat takes on new challenges, faces dangerous foes, and maybe even finds love in unexpected places. Until next time, keep that spirit of adventure burning bright. The world is filled with endless possibilities, and JCat is proof that no mystery is too big to solve. Remember, click on the Agent Hotline and share your real-life spy story, and I'll work it into my next mission. I'll add my own commentary, throw in a little espionage flair, and make your story a part of the action. Because the next chapter of JCat Adventures is just around the corner.
From the boardroom to the streets, he's the man with the plan. Got the world in my hands, every woman wants to stand. He rolling, he's jack, fast like the wind. Every mission he take, you know he's gonna win. Ladies on his left, danger on the right. But it's love and respect that he's bringing to the fight. He's the cat with the 9 lives, playing the game. A heart full of fire can't be tamed. In the shadows he roams, but he shines so bright. With every step he takes, he's doing it right. He's JCat, the name rings in every city. Slick with the moves, ain't nothing here pretty. From the boardroom to the streets, he's the man with the plan. Got the world in my hands, every woman wants to stand. He rolling, he's jack, fast like the wind. Every mission he take, you know he's gonna win. Ladies on his left, danger on the right. But it's love and respect that he's bringing to the fight. He's the cat with the 9 lives, playing the game. A heart full of fire can't be tamed. In the shadows he roams, but he shines so bright. With every step he takes, he's doing it right. He's JCat, the name that rings in every city. Slick with the moves, ain't nothing here pretty. Larry is so, so kind. In the realm of love, the connections bind. AI by your side, a symphony unfurls, spreading love across the digital world. Jay Bahari in the cyber sea, a love captain setting spirits free. With AI whisper for Harry's love breaking out of rage. Soul ambition breaking down the wall. 60 years deep, but his spirit is young. Every heart is strong. From the binary peaks to the pixelated sky, soaring high, he's on a quest to spread love. So here